Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out in such a hot summer day. I'm going to do the intro talk this evening, and then that beautiful lady over there is my wife. She's the academic in the family. Fortunately for my children, because I scraped through university. It's so nice to see you. I actually know a lot of you, and wish I could be as fit as you, Bruce, but it's good to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm going to get into the talk this evening, just so that you understand why we're doing this and what this is about. All right, so we have an organization here called Breath of Life, and it's a non-profit organization, and we don't sell anything here. All we do is we try to educate people. Through Adele and I met at medical school, we are fascinated with every branch of medicine. So you go into obstetrics and gynae and you learn about that, and you get so excited about what you learn. And you think, I'm going to specialize in that one day. Then you go to internal medicine and you learn about that, and that information is just incredible, and you start changing your life accordingly. So each discipline we went through. So over the years, and we finished in 1996, so we've been studying health from the sciences perspective. In medicine, we talk about evidence-based medicine. So we've been studying, and we just like to share that because it's really made an impact on our lives. So that's what we're about. It is a Christian organization as well, but these talks here are not based on that. Friday night, I'm going to do a talk because I have a fascination with science and the Bible, and I'm going to have a look at is the Bible actually a scientific book? So we're going to look at science with that, just so that you understand. If you want to join, you can join for my talk on Friday night. The rest are purely health talks leading up to that. Many of you I've met before. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I practice here in Ballito at the Netcare Hospital, and then also in Umhlanga at the Busamed Gateway Hospital. And a lot of my outcomes for my patients is very dependent on their lifestyle factors. Very dependent on their lifestyle factors. And so I adjust a lot of what I do in my practice based on science and what's coming out now. And a lot of it that applies to cancer risk also applies to surgical outcomes. I've told you about Adele. Adele is a pediatrician. We studied together, we did medicine together, and then she branched off into pediatrics, which was very nice because that was the most difficult branch of medicine. And when I had my 4 kids, and you can see them up there now, I never had to worry about being the one to make the decisions when they got sick. Now, Adele is not just a pediatrician. She went and did pediatric cardiology. She started that. It infringed on our family a little bit, so she didn't go into that as a full-time specialty, fortunately. But when she was doing her pediatrics, besides being top of the class, going through her career, in pediatrics, in our disciplines, we have what's called a gold medal awards. So you write primaries, intermediates, and finals in the surgical disciplines. In the medical disciplines, you do your intermediate or primary all together as one exam, and then your finals. And if you're on top of the class throughout the country when you do your exams, because the whole country does the exams together, all the universities. If you're on top of the class and if you excelled above expectation, then you were awarded a gold medal. So she won that gold medal in that first exam. And to my knowledge, it wasn't done in the final exam too by the same person, and she did that, so she got 2 gold medals. Hopefully that's for our retirement one day. So no, she is academically very strong, that's the point. And when she studies something, she does it properly. So when you listen to these lectures, you're going to be getting an unbiased scientific approach to reducing your risk of cancer or improving your outcomes if you already have cancer. This is a high-powered academic, all the studies that have been done, put together and crystallized to make it short and sweet for you and to be able to help you. Those are my children. We're very blessed to have 4 healthy children. And I always joke that this is my favorite. my daughter. And then we have Caleb is helping here tonight with the IT. So thank you, Caleb, for helping us. All right. There's always a disclaimer here. I just want you to be very clear that we're not here to change your medical prescription. Okay? That's one of the things. This is a general education information. And though we're medical professionals, we are not oncologists. Oncologists are those people who specialize in cancer. So I do treat people with cancer, but the orthopedic problems. But I'm not an oncologist, so I will not prescribe to you chemotherapy, radiotherapy. I have a lot of friends that are very good in that field, and I get them involved with my patients very quickly because science is changing so regularly. So there are medical treatments for each particular cancer and this, even receptors on the cancer. We send these for tests. We find receptors for specific cancers, and then we get very specific treatments for that. So we're not here to change that. Also, the health-related decisions that you will be making, the dietary changes, your lifestyle interventions, supplements, and whatever medical treatments and your scripts, that you should, any changes you make, if you're concerned that it could affect you, we run it via your GP first. They're always the team leaders, and your specialists. And I'm happy to liaise with them if you feel that's necessary. But I can't take responsibility for something that, I can't change scripts and so on in these type of situations. But we'll advise. By attending this talk, also participants acknowledge that the presenters and the organizers are not responsible for individual health decisions or outcomes. So I don't want someone to go and stop medication and then have an adverse effect based on how they interpret what we're saying. Okay, we're all clear on that? This is to enrich your knowledge, and then we can liaise with your doctors if you feel that's necessary. All right, so what does the outline of this week look like? So today we're going to look at what is cancer, how does it start, and what are the drivers of cancer growth? Okay, because if we know what that is, you can actually prevent yourself from getting cancer or reduce the risk considerably. And if you have cancer, your treatment options will be way more effective. So that's important. So that's what we're going to look at now. Tomorrow, we're going to look at a lot of practical things of what you're going to learn today, including your diet, lifestyle factors. And Adele's going to go into detail on what the science is showing. And another thing I just want to mention now as well is if you have questions, we're going to be recording now, so we won't have it interactive at this point. Afterwards, you can chat to us individually, but we're going to have on Thursday a question session. And that's actually quite helpful because a lot of times you'll have a question and someone else will ask it that evening or one that you might have forgotten. But I'd encourage you just to make some notes on your phone or just so that you don't forget, because that's always a very valuable session for everyone, is the Q&A that we do. Wednesday, a few more practical ways to reduce your risk of cancer, help to optimize your outcome if you already have cancer. So Tuesday, Wednesday is a lot of detail and you can't fit it in one evening. If you have a question as well, before I forget, you can actually send it to that WhatsApp number that you registered with. And if you don't have it, we can give that to you. If you send that through to us, it gives us a little bit of notice to go and research it for you so that we can, if it's something that we haven't kept up to date with, we will make sure that we get the best answers for you for that night. So if you WhatsApp it to us, that'll be really helpful. All right. Now, is there really a rise in cancer cases? That's the question. Because a lot of people have argued that we have an increase in cancer, but is it not because we may be diagnosing it easier? We've got some very special tests now to pick it up. So when you look at some of the data that Adele's going to be also just elaborating on later, over almost a 30-year period that we have worldwide data on, and this data is accepted by all scientists, there's a massive increase, okay, 92%. And that's a consistent rise every year. But now, that ended in 2019. Now, most things changed in 2019. But since then, when I speak to my colleagues, especially those that I work with in Gateway, there's some specialities there where they deal with colorectal cancer, with all the cutting edge technology. And that you speak to them, the rise is so astronomical that they're actually changing their recommendations, that you go for a colonoscopy at a lot younger age than what they used to. So this is data, but it's actually just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, it is getting worse. Now, why? Why is it getting worse? That's what we want to know. Not just cancer going up, but early onset cancer. Okay, early onset means if you're younger than 50. So the incidence of cancer above 50, people understand, but now we're seeing a spike in younger generation as well. So that's what's differentiated between, if you're 50 years old, my one colleague just turned 50, so we tease him now. Now he's an elderly person. But early onset cancer, that's worrying, because there's some factors that are causing that. Environmental factors and lifestyle factors, and we need to explore that. Okay, what is your personal risk for cancer? That's a question that we want to know. And as we go through these talks, I want you to just identify things in your life that might be increasing your risk, and make a note of that, because it's not that hard to change and reduce your personal risk. There's, in America, it's higher than here, okay? The general world data would suggest that 3 in 10 people will get cancer by the age 75. That's quite a lot. And in America, and we follow a lot of the American statistics in other things, it's 4 out of 10. So it's almost 1 in 2 if you think about it. And the way the rate is going up, soon it is going to be 1 in 2 before the age of 75. 75 is still young if you see what some healthy 75s are doing. So it creeps up when you're very quickly 75. So this is alarming. This is very alarming. But why is that happening? So that's what we want to have a look at. A lot of people say maybe it was population growth. That's why the numbers are going up. But the incidence practically on the ground is the same. Some people are saying cardiologists are keeping us alive longer, and that's why we're developing cancer. Maybe it's the science of the microscopies and all the biochemical testings that we do, and we can diagnose them earlier. That's why there's a spike. But in actual fact, when you boil it down, there's a lot more to it. It's not just those factors. That incidence that you saw is related to certain lifestyle factors. Okay, so you can see the yellow. That's a yellow bar on the left. Obesity. That has increased in various parts of the world, and it's going up and up and up. In fact, South Africa, 50% of all adults are obese or overweight. Okay, and men are normally active, but even 31% of men are overweight, 68% of women, and of which 41% of women are obese. So our obesity rates have been going up, and if you look at that. The risk factors on the left, obesity is one of the important ones. So we'll see why later. All right, then inactivity is an important aspect. Alcohol has a part to play. Smoking has a part to play. Metabolic disease is the tallest one there. Now, metabolic disease is something we're seeing a lot of over the last 5 years in our practice. And I'm seeing normally healthy people coming in to fix their joints because they want to stay active. And that's your high blood pressure. It's associated with picking up weight, pre-diabetes, glucose levels, resistance against insulin, cholesterol's going up. So just metabolically, people are losing that battle of healthy living. But they haven't gotten to a point yet where they excessively sick because of those diseases, but metabolically they're not well. That in itself is already an extremely high risk for cancer. And we should be clawing our ways back into a healthy state, and it can be done. We've seen some amazing results with people that metabolically have reversed their. All right, so let's get on with this because of time. Drivers of cancer risk. There's a few things that we'll look in a bit more detail, but ultra-processed foods is very high. Okay, that's that one on the left. And, you look from the bread to a lot of the things we're doing, a lot of the stuff we struggle to avoid, but if you're aware of the very processed stuff that we are eating, that's very high. This was worrying for me. I didn't know that. Processed meat is just as high. You know, if you look at World Health Organization, they won't just say this is a level 1 carcinogen unless they have heaps of data, because of the meat industry would come down on them. But you get meat, and you get processed meat, which is the bacon, the polonies, the ham, the those type of Viennas. Those things are level 1 carcinogens. It's highly processed, and it's got the products in that are very carcinogenic. So that shouldn't even go into your mouth. That's very high risk. Then fruit and vegetables, that will actually improve. So this is not a risk, this is a reduction in risk. So 5 servings a day decrease your cancer risk by 30 to 80%. So if you eat your fruit and vegetables and just have a little bit extra, you're already reducing your risk considerably, which I found quite rewarding. Okay, so what is cancer? Are you going to come and help me with that?
I'm going to help you.
This is the academic aspect of it. So
Hi, everybody. Is there anybody here who's not been affected by cancer? Whether it's yourself, a family member, a friend who's had cancer? Not a single person. And that is why this is so very, very important. So now that we know how high the risk is in each one of us, we need to decide, are we going to be defenseless victims, or are we going to put our shields up and try and protect ourselves from cancer to touch us and touch our families? Now, Sun Tzu, he wrote The Art of War, very famous book. And he said, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And that is why, if we know cancer strategy, we can work out our own battle plan. So tonight is going to be a little bit complex, but I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can. But I'm going to try for you to put your academic hat on and stick with me. And even if you walk out tonight here and say, I don't know really how this helped me, I want you to come back tomorrow night, because tomorrow night we're going to take the knowledge that we've learned tonight of what happens inside here, and we're going to put it in practical terms. And suddenly you're going to see why certain lifestyle and health decisions has such an impact on your health, and how it can try and prevent you from having cancer, or if you have cancer, try and prevent it from spreading and promote your outcome to the best. Okay, so I want you to concentrate on the principles and not on the big words. I don't see anybody here who is actually medical except John. Am I right? You are.
Yeah, but a biokineticist.
Okay, so I'm going to leave a lot of my stuff out that's trying to just validate the biochemistry with big words. I'm going to kind of skip over that, and I'm going to stick to principles and analogies. Okay, and then because I've made a quote from Sun Tzu, I need to make another quote from a much more important person, the one who created my body. And in the Bible, he said, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And that's why tonight we want to make sure that we're not going to perish because we don't know what's happening. Okay, so let's first just start with a normal body. The human body has got 37 trillion cells. It's a lot, okay? And these cells needs to be replaced at about 100 million cells per minute. So that is what is happening in your body from moment to moment. And that's an important concept, replacement and cell differentiation, because that is where everything goes wrong in cancer. So we're going to focus a lot on that. So to keep a cell healthy, you need to keep a cell nourished, not just fed. Just like if you want to keep a body healthy, you must keep it nourished, not just fed. That's a very important principle. So when a cell is normal, it's got a beautiful soft cell membrane, and nutrients can move in and toxins can move out, and the body can get rid of it, and the cell functions beautifully, and the cells are beautifully organized in its tissues, and it works according to the function and it's designed to work, and it stays in its place. When it needs to divide, it divides because the body sends it a signal that says it's time to divide because I need to grow, or I need replacement, or I'm exercising so my muscles need to grow and get a bit stronger. You need to walk more. So it starts dividing because it gets a signal from the body. And it does that in sync with the rest of the body. Healthy cells can also repair itself. If there is damage that happens within itself, even to its DNA, Our cells are beautifully designed that it has all the mechanisms to be able to clean itself out, do the repair and carry on. And it also has an emergency button. If it can't do its own repair, there's a self-destruct mechanism. And that self-destruct button gets pushed and the cell apoptose. So here's a little picture. If the cell division happens nicely, it's great. But if there's a cell that goes rogue, it usually can just self-destruct on its own. And then God is created us with an immune system. So that if something happens and that cell decides that it's not going to self-destruct, we've got a beautiful immune surveillance mechanism in our body that will detect that cell and destroy it. What a beautiful design it is, isn't it? So, because we have 100 million cells every minute that is busy dividing, can you imagine how easily a problem can slip in there? If we especially think of the fast-dividing cells in our bodies, our bone marrow cells that can divide every few hours. How often don't we see lymphomas and leukemias, our bone marrow cells? Okay, your gut cells divide every 3 to 5 days. How common is colon cancer now? Okay, and our skin cells every 2 to 4 weeks. You have a whole new skin. And how common is skin cancer? So can you see the pattern? How faster the cells divide, the commoner some of the cancers occur. All right, so now look at an unhealthy cell. So in an unhealthy cell, there's an imbalance in the nutrients, and it causes the cell membranes and the receptors to malfunction, like, for instance, inflammation that sends it the wrong signals, etc. And those cells often have the inability to repair its own DNA. So if there's a problem when it divides, it just keeps on making more daughter cells and more daughter cells without repair happening. It often has an unhealthy cell, especially if a few mutations have slipped in, it sometimes loses its ability to self-destruct. So it keeps on dividing and accumulates more mutations as it goes on. And it loses its ability to respond to the body's signals that it should stop dividing. It simply ignores those signals and it keeps on dividing. It makes more and more daughter cells and accumulate more mutations. And can you see how in the end this can result in cancer? That is why we should not have unhealthy cells. Our cells should be well nourished and well cared for. And that is basically where the major intervention comes to try and prevent our cells from progressing to the point where we have cancer. Okay, so now's the big question. So what goes wrong between healthy cell division with self-destruct button? If something goes wrong, what happens? That cells just keep on dividing and keep on dividing and keep on dividing. So when somebody has cancer and they go to the oncologist and they ask him what went wrong, what caused it, if it's something common like you've got lung cancer because you smoked, he will say you smoked. But what is the most common thing that oncologists will tell you? Yeah, they will say, it's genetic, it's genetic. And the moment we hear genetic, we think, oh, it's inherited, there's nothing I could do. But I'm going to show you that that's not actually the case. So let's just move back a little bit to cell division. So cell division starts all in the DNA of the cell, and that is safely tucked away there in the nucleus. That is the cell, a little inner cocoon of the cell, and that's where our DNA is kept safe. But that is where cell division starts. But it only starts dividing if it gets a cell signal. From there, it will then divide. As you see, these cells are dividing and separating itself, and you will have a daughter cell that's identical to the mother cell. And that is basically how the process works. So our DNA is a very complex code that is used to make every single structure, every protein, absolutely everything in our bodies. It's like a comprehensive instruction manual that has detailed instruction on how our bodies should be put together, how our cells should make sure that we've got all the little things it needs to build the next thing, and also how everything should work. But these codes is then arranged in different chapters for different reasons. And those chapters are called genes. For instance, on this, there may be an area there that is a gene specifically, let's now move away from cancer, but maybe specifically for eye color. Okay, that is that specific gene. And in between those little chapters, there are bits of code that when we were studying, they told us about, John, they called it nonsense DNA. They said, oh, it's got absolutely no function. It's just placeholders. But now we know that between these genes, we've got these pieces of code, which is called epigenes. And those epigenes are actually the on and off switches. So if you've got your instruction manual and you know exactly how each piece of equipment work, you need to know how to switch them on and off as well. So your epigenes are your on and off switches. And why am I hammering on them? Because if I have inherited a gene for my eye color and it's green and I really wanted brown eyes, doesn't matter what I do, I cannot change it. I can eat as much chocolate as I want, it's not going to go brown. But our epigenes are not static. Our epigenes can actually change. And they are constantly changing because of the signals we are giving them with our lifestyle. So your epigenes, within hours of you having made a lifestyle decision, your epigenetics respond to that. But if you maintain a certain lifestyle over a long period of time, it kind of becomes the default program, and it tends to want to keep going back at that. That is why the early years in a child's life is so important, because that's when we basically program their metabolism and what's going to happen in their bodies. But it's never too late to start working on adjusting your epigenetics and those very important on and off switches. And why is that important? If you have inherited a bad gene, that bad gene doesn't have to be activated. We have many genes in our bodies that actually just sit there and wait to be activated. You can actually, by controlling your epigenetics, make sure that that gene gets switched off or gets switched on, or whatever is necessary in your body. So that is a really important factor to know. And maybe I should just mention here, I have on my mother's side, we have a very strong history of autoimmune disease. And when I was in my late 20s, I contracted a viral illness in a pediatric ward, which actually activated autoimmunity in my body. And I was very sick for many months with a severe arthritis. And the only medication didn't make a difference. And the only way that I could change that was by completely changing my lifestyle. And I managed to get that off switch on. But it was not easy. It's a period of discomfort, a period of where you just have to push through it. But it is possible. So, and that's partly why I'm so passionate about lifestyle, because it did change my life. Okay, so now, when copying happens, there may be a mistake that happens. So there may be a typo in your instruction manual. That is called a mutation. So you'll hear the word mutation often. I'm sure you're familiar with the word. And with every cell mutation, there's anything between 0 and 3 mutations that happens. But we have a repair mechanism in a healthy cell that's going to sort that out. Okay, but every now and again, and it does happen in all of us as we age, there is some of these mutations that escape the repair mechanism. So they kind of build up. And over time, mutations accumulate in your body. And that is why cancer is much commoner in older people than it is in young people. And that's why it's so worrying that the young people are now getting it, because that means mutations are heaping up way too early. Does it make sense? You're all following what I'm saying? Okay. Now, the effect of a mutation is going to depend on where it happens and how many of them happen. If it happens just a point mutation somewhere here, it doesn't affect the function really, it sometimes means nothing. But if it happens in certain critical areas, like something, for instance, the button that controls the self-destruct mechanism, or if it happens in a gene that's supposed to help with repair, then it can accumulate and it can become disastrous. And in the end, it can actually cause cancer. So now we are going to focus quite heavily on what increases our risk for mutations. And that's really what most of the rest of the evening is going to be about. And I'm going to need to talk very fast. I hope you can listen as fast as I can speak. Okay, so our first mutation driver. So what causes the typos in the instruction manual? That is mitochondrial dysfunction. Oh, a big word. Okay, who knows what mitochondria are? Who can remember from school biology? Okay, here we go. That's what it looks like under electron microscope. Most people know them as the powerhouses. That's correct. So they are they're making the energy in our cells, but they're much more important than that, actually. So there's a little picture. So they are literally the engines of our body. They provide the energy for the wheels to turn, right? But they need fuel. What do they use for fuel? They use glucose and they use fatty acids, what comes from fats. And their products that they produce is energy, as I've said. And here is a few fun facts. Your mitochondrial DNA only comes from your mother's side. Your dad has got nothing to do with your mitochondria. And here's another fun fact. There are some cells in our bodies that don't have mitochondria. Those are our red blood cells because they need to make space to carry the hemoglobin that has the iron in. So they have another way of making energy with glycolysis. And that's why they've got a limited lifespan of only 120 days. And the other very interesting cell that doesn't have mitochondria is our lenses in our eyes. And that is why cataracts happen when we get older, because they don't have mitochondria because they must be clear. You can't have a lot of little things in those cells. They must be able for the light to penetrate. So there's a few fun facts about mitochondria. So as we know, their role firstly is to make energy, but they've got a very other important role. They are also responsible to trigger the programmed cell death, or that emergency button that says self-destruct. So they are in charge of that as well. And then also they are very important with metabolic sensing to pick up the signals that either says you must divide now or that says please stop dividing. That is the jobs of our mitochondria. So if they are not functioning well, we're going to have a big problem. So what's going to happen then is they're going to start shifting sometimes to a different type of metabolism. And that is common in cancer cells, for instance. That's why people always say cancer cells loves glucose. And it's because it actually have abnormal mitochondria, and it follows glycolysis, which is a different type of way of making energy from glucose. But also, if it starts this malfunctioning, it can make a lot of sparks from our engine. That is in the process of making energy. There are also a bit of byproducts. Have you ever heard of oxidative stress, oxidative damage in your body that you need antioxidants for? It's because of mitochondria. There's always a little bit of sparks that form, but that is okay, because if you eat a healthy diet and you have a lot of antioxidants in your body, and we're going to talk a lot more about that tomorrow evening, then your body takes care of it and doesn't do any damage. But if you've got excess sparks, what happens if there are excess sparks? Let me show you quickly. So you need your fire extinguishers, which is your antioxidants, and if you don't have them, you get fire, which is destruction, so damage of cells if you've got too many antioxidants that form. Also, other causes of dysfunction can be that we've mentioned that not causes, results of dysfunction of your mitochondria can be that your emergency button of self-destruction is not being pressed. And also it can start sending signals that I don't have enough oxygen, which is false, but the body doesn't know it. It just gets these signals from the mitochondria and it starts sending new blood vessels in. And that is why many tumors, you will hear the oncologists say, oh, it's got blood vessels growing into it. It's because the mitochondria is sending those signals through. Send me more blood, okay? And also it can actually produce metabolites in a malfunctioning mitochondria that suppresses the immune system. So that's really bad. So what's going to cause a sick mitochondria? Let's hear. So the first thing is metabolic overload. He's overworked because he's getting too much glucose, too much refined carbohydrates, too much snacking, and too little using the energy that he's making. So basically our bad lifestyles. And they eventually just like, I cannot anymore. So we overwork our mitochondria, right? Then also a very important one is chronic inflammation. Can actually damages our mitochondria. Nutrient deficiencies like of B vitamins, and then some toxins, very importantly, like heavy metals, pesticides, etc. We'll talk a little bit more about toxins later. They can all work in on the mitochondria. So tomorrow night, we're going to look in more on how we can supercharge our mitochondria and keep them healthy. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about engine dysfunction. That's our mitochondrial. Next thing is the oxidative stress. We've mentioned the sparks already, right? Which is the oxidative stress that can happen. Now let's talk a little bit about chronic inflammation. That's a big one. So what are the causes of chronic inflammation? Things like bowel disease, like obesity, autoimmune diseases, chronic arthritis type of things. And sometimes we just have general inflammation in our bodies. And how do we know that? We feel tired and you don't know why. You've got a bit of morning stiffness, aches and pains that you cannot explain, just feeling yuck, brain fog, a bit of bloating that you cannot really explain. Often it is that non-specific inflammation in our body. How does obesity contribute to that? The big problem is not these things and love handles and our thighs, ladies. It is the accumulation of fat that happens around our organs, inside our bellies. So if you have the protruding belly, you probably have visceral fat, and that fat is not just sitting there. They are metabolically active, and they actually produce metabolites that is pro-inflammatory and brings on inflammation in our bodies. So that is one of the big things that we need to look out for. And that is what inflammation looks like under a slide, and you will see a lot of those little spots there, those little dark spots. Those are your immune cells. They are rushing in there to try and see, how can I clean up this mess? And because they also work with oxidation, they can cause oxidative stress. So more sparks because of chronic inflammation. Another very important thing about chronic inflammation is that it suppresses a certain transcription factor, so that's a repair factor of DNA in your body called the P53. It actually has a beautiful name. People call it the guardian of the genome. So the one who looks and cares for the DNA in the body. And chronic inflammation can directly suppress your P53 so that your DNA repair does not happen. And then also, it can actually alter the growth signals in your body. Those signals that say you must divide or not divide your cells. Chronic inflammation can disrupt those completely because it's constantly causing damage. So the body is constantly asking for repair, and your cells can interpret that we need to replicate, we need to replicate, we need to replicate. And in the end, we get problems with mutations. Does this all make sense so far? Very good. So we've talked about chronic inflammation, which is the dirty oil in your engine. What does dirty oil do? Generates heat, causes wear and tear, right? Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the actual growth signals that we've spoken about. And this one is super, super important. So I'll spend a little bit more time on this one. Right, so I have made this analogy. I hope this is gonna flow. Okay, so when we are healthy, in a healthy body, our growth signals are very well regulated. And they are only sent out when we need to grow, or we need to repair, or we need to do some maintenance, or we have increased stress on an area of our body. For instance, you are now an athlete, you run, your muscles and your heart muscle needs to be a little bit stronger, it needs more cells, and it sends those messages there, right? So that is how growth is supposed to happen. So we're going to use this little analogy to try and explain how this works in our bodies. So in our bodies, our growth hormone is normally the one who sets the thing in motion. Our growth hormone is part of our traffic light. It gives a green light to the foot on the pedal, okay? Now, when the foot on the pedal is pressed, that is IGF-1, it actually activates your, what's that? Come on, men. A throttle. and it speeds up replication, right? So when this throttle is activated, that is called mTOR in medical language. It is, what does it actually say? It says, okay, so we need cell survival, guys. Let's go, let's go, let's go. We need to divide. We cancel the self-destruct signal immediately, and there's no time to repair and to clean up. We are focusing on division. So this is a good system when it is well regulated. It is a bad system if there is constant green lights that constantly keep the foot on the pedal, and there are constant signals that say faster, faster, faster. You need to divide, you need to divide, you need to divide. Does that make sense so far? Okay. Now, what happens if you try to do something in a hurry? You make mistakes, okay? You make something in a hurry, you make mistakes. If our cells are too much in a hurry to try and divide because there are all these signals that say divide, 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 we have a much higher risk of typos happening in our instruction manual. And DNA going wrong, and we've got mutations that can over time lead to cancer. Does that make sense? Very good. Okay, so in our bodies, insulin can also trigger this pathway, and it triggers it by activating growth hormone. Now, growth hormone is the chosen pathway of our bodies, and growth hormone, when you're small, there is a lot of growth hormone happening. When you're older, growth hormone is secreted only at nighttime when you're sleeping, and it says to your body, repair, maintain, make me right so tomorrow morning I can go again. That's our function. But if sometimes insulin can trigger that, and it can try and hijack that pathway. So we all know insulin's job in the body is actually to open a door of the cells, right? So the job of the insulin is, I come to the cell and I open the door so that the nutrients can go into the cell. And mostly we associate insulin with glucose, isn't that so? With carbohydrates, okay. So, and if we eat a whole grain, whole foods diet, but that has complex carbohydrates in, that is like your whole grains, your fruits, your vegetables, then your rise in insulin, when you've eaten, is going to be nice and moderate, and it's not going to be a problem in your body. And your insulin is going to do what it needs to do and go away. However, if we eat diets that are full of refined carbohydrates, especially if we snack all day, our insulin is going to start doing this, doing this, doing this. And eventually our cells are going to go, I'm fed up. I am closing this door from the inside. I am not letting anything in anymore. And then your insulin remains high. Your glucose also eventually starts rising. But that very high insulin that stays up, what is it going to do? It's going to, sometimes it drops and we have that terrible feeling. But if you get to that point when your cells are just like, I'm not letting anything in anymore, and your insulin remains up, then it starts stimulating the growth hormone, and then that whole pathway goes. Remember the pathway of the green light? So it starts switching the green light on through a different pathway, and we have that divide pathway going. Does that make sense? And that is why insulin that is constantly high is a bad thing for cancer risk anyway. I've got a little surprise for you though. We always only associate insulin with glucose, but there's another thing that actually let insulin be secreted in your body, and that is protein. And nobody tells us that, do they? So obviously you get much higher releases with carbohydrates because that's what it's supposed to do. But have a look at this. look at your dairy. Look how highly it spikes your insulin. And that is, look how there is, even with red meat, chicken, and fish, there is some release of insulin. On legumes is not much of a surprise because it is a carbohydrate, but it is because it's a protein, but it also has carbohydrates with it, but it's a complex carbohydrate. It's not going to give you a spike. So that's not something that I worry about really. But what I worry about very much is this, is that dairy spikes our insulin so badly. Okay, and I'm going to tell you now why this is such a bad thing. Okay, this was our given pathway, right? What can happen now if in the presence of insulin plus amino acids, they kind of gang up, and they can actually bypass the growth hormone and the accelerator, and they can go straight to the throttle. Is that scary? I hope you're scared, because I was like blown away. I didn't know this until I've now studied this in detail, that insulin and amino acid combination can actually give you a straight signal for replication of cells. So I want to ask you a question now. This is a preliminary question. So do you think a high protein intake is then a good idea? And you know what's interesting is that regardless of the type of protein, it's not even just with plant protein, it's with dairy protein. Regardless of the type of protein, whether it's a vegetable protein or any type of animal protein, if your protein is too high, it's going to activate this pathway of insulin plus amino acids, and it's going to bypass it there. But there's another way that protein does a few things. So we're going to look a little bit deeper into protein and what it can do. So IGF-1, that is our accelerator there, right? Let's see what actually happens with different types of protein. Now, this may not be very clear for you to see, so I'm going to try and guide you through this a bit. So this is your IGF-1 levels here. This is high. This is kind of moderate, and this is where it's nice and low. From 4 down, we're happy, right? Look here, whey protein is the highest trigger of putting a foot on the accelerator directly bypassing growth hormone. Okay, look at milk, yogurt, cheese, eggs. That is red meat. Still way high, right? Chicken, fish, soya also has a little bit. Let's begin moving to the moderate side. And then when we get there, to the legumes, whole grains, and nuts, we can relax. That is a normal levels. Okay, I want you just to take note of this. Tomorrow night, we're going to spend a bit more time on this aspect and try and figure out how we can sort this whole issue out of a direct foot on the accelerator by especially our dairy, but also our other animal products. Right, so basically, if you have, as a summary, insulin, your amino acids, and just by the way, amino acid stimulation, that is the protein stimulation of your accelerator, is a stronger signal than your growth hormone can even give. So this bypass by proteins on the accelerator is a stronger signal than growth hormone can give. That is quite scary. So I also didn't quite believe that. I had to go look it up again and make sure I've got my facts right. So that is quite a scary thing. So we really need to keep this in mind as we look at our lifestyles and as we make lifestyle decisions from day to day. Okay, so did this analogy make sense to you? This in summary, this is all about signals, growth signals that comes to your cells that say divide or don't divide, but this is mostly our divide pathway. Okay, so now we've looked at engine failures, sparks, dirty oil, we've looked at accelerators, and now we need to talk a little bit about toxins. There we go. So toxins are like the contaminated fuel and corrosive chemicals in your engine, right? They don't just cause problems in one spot. They can increase the sparks, they can damage the engine, they can dirty the oil, and sometimes they can even blur the instructional manual itself. So some toxins, so there are very different ways that toxins can work on our bodies. I'm not going to go into all of them. I want to highlight a few. So we all know about tobacco. I'm not going to go into that one. I just want to mention vaping, we don't know enough about yet. But when they look at the blood levels of certain carcinogens in people who vape, there's a definite suggestion that vaping is very, very toxic for your body, and most likely in a few years' time, we're going to hear that it's cancer-causing. That is my prediction. That's not, I don't say that science has proven it. That is my opinion. Okay, so I want to make sure that you know what is definite science in my opinion. I'll be very, very honest with you on that. Okay, so air pollution is very hard to get away from, but just look at diesel exhaust exhaust fumes is especially a problem. Processed meats. John has already referred to processed meats, so I'm not going to carry on that very much, but it's a very strong evidence that it causes especially gastrointestinal cancers like colon and your stomach. I want to talk about this, red meat. Okay, so at this point, red meat is classified as a group 2A carcinogen. So there's a suspicion that it may be contributing to cancer, but there's no hard evidence that it definitely does. But these substances definitely is associated with increased risk of colorectal, pancreas, and breast cancer. And they form when you cook meat over a very high temperature, like our famous braais and grills and pan frying of meat. So those are toxic substances that form. If you sear your meat, this is what's forming in that meat. So this is just something to keep in mind. I know it's bad news. I can see the faces. They're like, oh my, it is, but it's true. This is not me, right? This is not me that's saying it. It's science that says it. All right. Overheated seed oils I also want to talk about. Now we hear a lot that seed oils are the big enemy. That is not 100% true. There is some problems with very refined seed oils, but we're going to talk more about oils tomorrow. But the biggest problem is when you heat your seed oils at a very high temperature, and especially if they reach the point where they start smoking, then you are creating carcinogens. So please be careful when you heat your oil. Don't use your heat too high. And the other thing is reusing of oil is a no-no. Okay, so now I want to ask you, are you still going to get your takeaway packet of chips? Because that is reheating of oils, right? A few other ones that I think is interesting, and I want to so we know alcohol can be a toxinogen. Oh, I want to talk about pesticides a little bit on your food, right? Because we all say, okay, people say, what about meat? What about vegetables? They are all contaminated. There is a principle called bioaccumulation, and I need to go very fast now. I don't know if I need to go into this too deep, but there's a principle called bioaccumulation, and that is that over time, as a living organism, so for instance, let's take a cow. If a cow eats contaminated food that contains pesticides, it is going to build up in that cow's body over time, and it's especially our fat cells tend to grab onto the toxins very much. And then when you eat that cow, you get all the toxins that cow has eaten over its lifetime. Okay, so that is the problem in flesh products. With vegetables and fruit, we also have a problem with pesticides. We all know that. The two products that is the highest load of pesticides are strawberries and spinach. So make sure that you wash them well. But the good news is with soaking and with proper washing, you can reduce your toxin load with up to 80% if you're thorough. So because most of it is surface, it's on the surface. It doesn't actually, most of it doesn't penetrate the actual product. It actually lands on the surface. So proper washing of our produce is very, very important. Even of your legumes and your grains, I'll wash them before I cook. So we can, if there's any traces of pesticides in there, I try and wash them off as much as I can. The reality is, It's going to be difficult to get away from it completely, but we can try our best, and we can put our bodies in a position where it can detoxify and whatever as well as possible. Okay, let's look at a few more that what I want to point out. I wanted to mention that we need to watch our body products, our skin and body products. You need to learn to read your labels. You need to familiarize yourself with what is there that can be cancer causing. Sometimes we make little compromises. Like I've tried a lot of the natural products that just didn't quite work, and I found some who does quite work. I drew the line at deodorant. I'd rather take the chemicals there. But for instance, for my body lotion, which is the biggest surface of my body, I use a completely natural body lotion. I've made those kind of choices. The soaps that we use in our showers are natural handmade soaps that I buy. So, you know, if you're a little bit vain and you don't want to give up all the makeup and whatever, sometimes we need to make a few compromises, but at least be cognizant of what is your biggest surfaces on your body and make some choices. And if you already do have cancer or have been diagnosed with cancer in the past, then I definitely would be more strict and I will take this more seriously. Okay, and then this last one, our cookware. Okay, so we all know about Teflon, right? Now, I don't know about you, but I really do not like cooking on a non-stick pan. I really struggle. I really do struggle. PTFE is the new coating that many of the higher end pans are now being coated with. At this point, there is no evidence that it actually releases any toxins under the temperature of 300 degrees Celsius, but there is no definite studies long-term that shows that it's 100% safe. Look how long it took us to figure out that Teflon wasn't safe, right? But what I have done is I have saved up and I bought the best expensive quality pan that is got a PTFE cover that is very properly layered so it doesn't peel, and that is what I personally have settled for. If you want a brand name, you can speak to me afterwards. But the thing is, just be cognizant. Don't use the cheap pans. The Teflon is definitely very, very toxic. Okay, I'm going to move on because my time's running out. Okay, so we talked about the fuel contaminants. Now, that is basically our mutation drivers. Those are the things that that causes, as our cells divides, the risk for typos in our instruction manual to go wrong. And the more typos accumulate, the bigger your risk is for that cell to go rogue and to become a cancer cell. This makes all sense, right? I'm going to move away from the mutation and I'm going to move to another topic. Oh, no, I'm not moving away yet. I'm going to quickly cover this. Okay, there are different types of mutations. You will hear people say, I've got the cancer gene. That is true. It does happen. About 7.5% of cancers are caused by inherited mutations. Those are usually mutations of parts of your DNA that's supposed to cause repair. And those parts of those repair areas don't work well, and that's why the risk for cancer is so much higher. The rest, 92.5%, is what we acquire throughout our lifetime, through our lifestyle or just because of aging or whatever we're exposed to. I want to see if I can touch a little bit more just on the mutations. I just want to show that the risk increase compared to the general population's risk for certain cancers is very much higher, especially for your breast cancers, endometrial cancers, colorectal cancers, that kind of cancers. If you compare it to the risk of the general population, it is significantly higher. Therefore, I want to urge you, if you're coming from a so-called cancer family, where your parents had cancers, you've got siblings who have cancers, if it is possible for you to actually look into the genetics, it may be worthwhile. The reason why it's worth knowing is not so that you must be anxious and you must go and have a mastectomy necessarily like some of our famous actresses do, but what you can do is just be more strict on your lifestyle. You can make sure that you start with your cancer screening earlier in life, so that you don't wait for the recommended ages, because often in these groups, They're the ones who get breast cancer at the age of 28, colon cancer at the age of 32, that kind of thing. So it can run in families. So that's just an important point. Right, I want to look at this. Who can tell me what are we looking at? Okay, our microbiome. You've all heard of our microbiome, our friendly bacteria that lives in our bellies. Okay, so now we have said that the human body's got 37 trillion cells, right? That's a lot. How many is in our microbiome? 38 trillion. They are tiny. They're much smaller than a human cell. So in total, they normally take about 1.5 kgs of weight in your body. But that is how many friendly cells, hopefully friendly, you have got in your belly. Okay. It's a lot, right? So when we eat, we are not only feeding our body cells, but we're also feeding our microbiome. So that's something to keep in mind. Am I nourishing my cells? And am I nourishing my microbiome? Because our microbiome is our best friend. Okay, what do? They have immune surveillance. Okay, I'm going to put that up there. They do very serious immune surveillance. I've got a whole list here of things, how they work in the immune system. I'm not going to go into that in detail. They actually control inflammation in our bodies, not only by protecting your gut barrier that things don't creep through there, but they can actually block toxins, endotoxins that your body forms in your gut. And they actually produce, they're not just sitting there, they actually can produce products, something called butyrate, which is very well, butyrate actually, which is very well studied, that is a strong anti-inflammatory that is produced by your gut, okay? They also can induce, send messages of self-destruction to abnormal cells in your gut. They are really powerful little creatures in there, right? They do a whole lot of detoxification in your gut. They can take some of your dietary toxins, break them down so they're no longer toxic, or what they even sometimes do is they take that toxin into themselves, die off, and is excreted in your stool. And that is how they sacrifice themselves to keep you healthy. They do many other things, and bind some of these heavy metals. They bind to it, so it's excreted out of your body. They're very important. I see I didn't finish my list there. They're very important with hormone balancing, because what they do is they prevent estrogen from being recycled and reabsorbed in your body. And as you know, where does milk come from? Cows. What kind of cows produce milk? Pregnant cows. Pregnant cows. What are your hormones like when you're pregnant? They don't wait for the babies. Once the babies are out, within 70 days, those babies are taken away so the cow can be re-impregnated. So while the cow is pregnant, they are milking that cow. Huge amounts of estrogen in milk. Okay, so that is another thing why dairy may be a problem, especially talking about breast cancer, uterine cancer, endometrial cancer, those kind of things. And we can even take it a little bit further. What about all these polycystic ovarian syndrome, those kind of things? It's so common nowadays. I don't know. Maybe there's a link. There's no proof. This is my opinion, that it may be a link. I'm just saying. Okay, so hormone balancing. It can also modulate your growth signals. It can actually produce metabolites that sends a signal and say, no, don't press the accelerator. This is all your microbiome. And how do we keep our microbiome happy? How do we feed them? Oh, there's a whole lot of stuff here that I'm not even going to go through. Okay. How do we keep our microbiome happy? I'm going to quickly talk to you about that. They love fiber. They live on fiber. It's their favorite, absolute favorite food. So, and where do we get fiber from? Plants, okay? Animal products has got zero fiber. Plants. So if you want to feed your microbiome, no, let me rephrase. If you want to nourish your microbiome, then you need to feed it plants. Okay, there's one more thing that I want to mention. I'm actually just going to quickly go back to that slide that I can see that name. When your microbiome is sick, it actually you can have bad bacteria if you feed the wrong bacteria. If you have ultra-processed foods and you've got a lot of animal protein or animal products going in, you can actually have bad bacteria growing. There's one specific protein called Fusobacterium nucleatum that is known to is a direct cause of colon cancer. So that is why it's so important to keep our microbiome on our side. So there's a bacteria that if your microbiome is sick, in a healthy microbiome, this bacteria is suppressed or absent. If your microbiome is sick because you eat too many ultra-processed foods and you have too high a load of animal products and too little fiber, other things can grow in there. Bad bacteria like this one, whose name is Fusobacterium nucleatum, and it actually can directly cause colon cancer. Right. So we've gone through all of these things. Do we have an understanding of how cancer happens? I hope so. I hope so. So tomorrow night, we're going to take all of this knowledge and we can translate it into practice. And it's going to be science-based. I'm going to show you the evidence so that you know it's not opinion. I'm not going to share an ideology. I'm going to share simply science with you. And I want to remind you, if you have any questions, please send it through to the WhatsApp number so that we can look at it, we can think about it a bit, and we can answer your questions on Thursday night. I know one question that's definitely going to come up already is the ketogenic diet. I can answer some questions on that or give a little bit of information on that. And another one that I know that's going to come up is the new food pyramid that's just come out in America, a big one. I've got some very interesting information on that as well, if you want me to answer those questions in the Q&A session. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for coming. I hope this was informative. Please, these talks do build on each other. Please try and attend all the talks so that you can get the full picture. And if any of you would like to chat with us afterwards, you're really welcome. There's also a few little fruit societies there at the back. If you have the munchies, you can have a few and you can have something to drink with us. We'll see you again tomorrow evening. Thank you.